whatever surface or whatever environment that you train in, it's just being smart, like Ben said, around like just use what you've got. So even if you've not got a lot of cones and equipment, like sometimes it's just, right, Ben, you put a cone down, I'll put a cone down, and we'll play 1v1 where you've got to break over the middle line. Dead easy. And then, okay, once you've played 1v1, go play another pair, play 2v2 like Ben says. So then you can almost give them like progressed little activities while you're still setting the main part of your session up.
Say your venue, you've got a third of a pitch, but obviously the last team is squeezed every single second out of their time slot, and you're thinking, well, all your players are there, all your parents are there. What can you do then? Obviously, hopefully not panic, but what can you do to avoid that?
Have player-led activities. So player-led activities that you can get the players to go straight in, and they can set something up whilst you maybe set the main session up. So maybe supervised by an assistant coach or whoever you've got at your disposal within that environment. But real simple games, so it could just be something as simple as two people, 4 cones and a ball, go play 1v1. That's it. Then they can set that up, and it's been done. I've done that with 6-year-olds. 6-year-olds can set that up. Will they get it right? Maybe not. We might have to do a little bit of support work around. Is your area big enough? Is it too big? Because you will get those pairs who will set one goal up there and one goal up right down the other end of the pitch. And you're like, now you're going to be running a lot rather than touches on the ball. So it's about giving them that ownership, that responsibility to go, can you set up? That gives you that time to then set anything you can up. But another part of that is, and I don't know what Sarah thinks on this, be clever with what you've got. So if you have got that middle third of a 3G that you alluded to, you've got a ready-made circle in the centre of the pitch. Use that to some extent. Maybe that could be your arrival activity, maybe it could be your main session, but you don't need to set any cones out. You've already got it. I don't know what your thoughts are on that, but you've set up.
Yeah, exactly, because I remember times running sessions inside like sports halls. So they might have like a badminton court on there, netball court, markings and stuff, and sometimes it's like, right, you go play on the blue pitch, you go play in the yellow area, so then you're not having to put stuff down ready for the players to, you know, to go and play in their activity. You can let them do that and direct them to it. Using benches as like goals and things like that. So I think it's, you know, whatever surface or whatever environment that you train in, it's just being smart, like Ben said, around like just use what you've got. So even if you've not got a lot of cones and equipment, like sometimes it's just, right, Ben, you put a cone down, I'll put a cone down, and we'll play 1v1 where you've got to break over the middle line. Dead easy. And then, okay, once you've played 1v1, go play another pair, play 2v2 like Ben says. So then you can almost give them like progressed little activities while you're still setting the main part of your session up. Or it might just be, do you know what, there's an area there, we've got the goals there, just go play a match, you know, 4v3 until everybody arrives, and then we'll get into the main part of the session as well. So yeah, it's not overcomplicating it really. I think it's just keeping it very simple, having some little maybe progressions up your sleeve as well. So, you know, you don't want them doing one thing for too long because they might get a little bit bored. But yeah, keeping it simple and keeping them challenged and like engaged with it as well.
So on that theme, how can coaches kind of get the right area sizes? How do they know what area to set up?
I think you've got to, I think as coaches, we've all got this kind of idea in our head when we're planning sessions around this is the perfect size. But until you actually get it on the pitch, you don't know. You can base it loosely, especially if you're working with younger players, always base it on what the needs of the players are. So do they need more space? Do they need less space? And why is that within that certain practice? As you progress and as players become older, then start thinking about what is the format and how big are the distances on the pitch that we play. So if it's 11v11, you roughly can work out what the size of the pitch is, and then if I'm doing a practice, well, I'm going to need the width of the 18-yard box because I'm playing in central areas. So you might need to have a think about how I can put that in my session. Is that practical in every session? Probably not, because if you've got a third of a 3G, you're less than the width of the 18-yard box. So you've got to be really kind of thinking about how do I design this game that I want to help my players develop a specific skill or a specific phase of the game with what I've got. And sometimes you can't work specifically with the distances that you need. You've got to work on the concept of what you're trying to achieve, and then think about how they can apply that when they go from training on a Thursday to match on a Saturday or a Sunday.
Yeah, I was just thinking as Ben was talking there, some past experience really. So if you're doing a in possession session and you set up an area, you notice that the ball's going out a lot, or like it's every 2 or 3 passes the ball's going out, or the play's breaking down, that might be a little trigger for you to go, I need to increase the area size to give them a little bit more space and time to make a decision or to execute a certain thing. So and then you might do that on the opposite way, that if you're doing like an out of possession session, let's say you're working on pressing and you're going, wow, they're getting really tired really quickly, or actually maybe not getting as much success as I want, then you might go, right, I might bring it in here and make it a little bit smaller. So I think it's always around matching what your players needs, like Ben said, and also around where they're getting success and what you're working on. So it's really important your practice design and your space and your area size like really like marry up with what you're trying to work on, otherwise you might not get the outcomes that you want.
Now, when you're in a session, in a perfect world, every coach would know exactly how many people are going to turn up and when, but we know that that's not always the case. So how, in your eyes, can coaches adapt to deal with that once training has started, that players are turning up at different times and maybe not having the expected numbers arrive?
I think the first thing for me is just recognise, depending context driven on the age group, it's not always their fault that they're not there on time. That it could be forces beyond their control. It could be that they're relying on parents who are rushing home from work to get them to your session. But I think as a coach, we always have to kind of expect it. I don't know what you'd say. I mean, I working in different environments, grassroots, the talent pathway environment, it happens. People will be late, and it's how we then become as coaches adaptable to that, and go, well, we've got 12, brilliant. Oh no, they've turned up 13. You've ruined my practice. Well, actually, no. There's a real opportunity to go. Where can we now, as a group of coaches, or even asking the players, where can we fit this person in so the practice can still? And sometimes it's just tweak. You might have to tweak the task. So I'm thinking of a passing and receiving practice that I did a couple of weeks ago, and I needed 12. That was perfect, but 13 were there, so I've got to deal with it. And it's just a case of, right, one group has 4, but they rotate. That's just a rotation. You might have to do a little bit more explanation with them around what it looks like, but within 30 seconds they were doing it, they got it. And they're playing the same game as everyone else. The task looks slightly different because they're rotating it a little bit more. So it's just about that adaptability and being able to go, right, someone here. And I think also a key point here is, and I'm pretty sure, I don't know what you think on this, Sarah, don't be afraid to play unequal numbers. I think we've got it in our heads sometimes, and I've been guilty of this in the past, of teams are unfair, it's 4 against 5. It's not unfair, it's unequal. We can make it fair, so you could stretch and challenge your players like you talked about individually. The 4 could be the 4 that are flying ahead. You've got one less player, go deal with that now. Because those overload, underload situations happen in football, and we have to prepare players for that. If, for example, it's 4v5 and the coach says, I'll go in goal, well, number one, no, safeguarding issue, health and safety concern, but you don't need that. The players need that experience to go play underloaded. I don't know what that's something I've done quite a lot. Just, no, you'll play 4v5.
Yeah, or sometimes you might have like a magic player. So, you might have a magic player that maybe plays for both teams, for example. If you don't want to, if you feel like your players might not be able to cope with an overload or dealing with an underload, for example, then you might have a magic player, or you might have a bounce player that you rotate in and out. So what I mean by a bounce player, let's imagine that you're playing a game. You might have someone where it's their job just to make little wall passes. You go, right, for a minute, how many little wall passes can you make to your teammate? And then we'll swap it around. Just as an example, if you're trying to deal with unequal numbers. But I think just as a practical kind of tip is, generally it might be due to traffic or arrivals or whatever it is, people getting late to your session. So for the start of your session, plan a game. So plan a game that they can just get on with, they can get playing. So we talk about this thing, always start with a match. But actually sometimes it's for us to like, all right, let me just check how many players I've got, and has everybody arrived, and has this person arrived, and it just gives you a bit of thinking time, and it buys you a bit of time as the coach. Or if you can't play a game, you might just play a little small number of practices where, a bit like we spoke about at the start really, it might be a little dribbling game, or it might be some little 1v1, some little 2v1s. It might be like what I call like a snakes and ladders game. So you've got like little channels, and it's like, right, can you dribble there as fast as you can? And then the next one you might have to go 1v1, and then on the third one you might have to go 1v2. So them kind of practices allow you that no matter what numbers turn up, they can just get on with it. So it doesn't really matter, and then, I know people, some coaches that I've spoke about go, oh, well, you know, what if they argue? What if they say it's unfair? And then, well, that's then when we talk about the holistic part of player development and go, well, what would you do in a game if you had a player less? Would you come and just tell me that it's unfair, or would you just try and play? So then we're giving them a little bit of kind of like ownership and life skills as well for them to self-regulate and go, oh, we've got one player less. All right, well, I fancy the challenge. So you're almost like kind of getting them to think differently about like, oh, it's unfair. Like, oh, actually, maybe, I want to have a go at this challenge. So there's loads of stuff within that. But I think the main thing, what Ben said, is don't worry, don't panic if that happens. And I don't think I've ever had a session where the exact numbers have ever turned up, or they've turned up, you know, like on time. So I think no matter what level you work at, we always face these challenges. It happens all the time. Just don't worry about it.
I think a really good point to pick up on that you just said about having that magic player that can be looked at from a different perspective with player development in mind. It could be that player who technically needs a little bit more support with, if your example is passing, well, being that magic player gives them that, because all of a sudden they play for both teams, they get lots of repetition. And you've got to be clever with conditions and constraints. You can't score till you've played through the magic player, or if you play through the magic player, it's worth double, or anything like that. Anything you can think of or come up with that'll work for your players. But also kind of going across the holistic spectrum, you're looking at the psychological side of it. It could be that player who's really struggling with confidence, getting them on the ball a lot, getting them lots of touches, repetition. So it's kind of thinking that all these things that we're doing in our practice design, we can impact on player development, and that's what we're trying to do, but across a lot of different areas.
So you've got your team into a session, but how do you know when the time is right to move on, to adapt the practice, or maybe to stay and let players figure out a little bit more?
Yeah, because I think again it comes back to that planning, doesn't it? I think sometimes we get hooked with, we write our plan and we write 10 minutes and we're there going, it's only 8. Hang on 2 minutes, we're playing for 2 more minutes, when actually they might need stretching, they might need challenging. I think just don't be bound by time within your session. If you've got an hour, you know you've got the hour. That's the only thing you should be bound by. Warm up standard 5-10 minutes, maybe your warm up arrival activities. Then if your first session, if after 10 of your 20 minutes, the players are flying, you have to adapt, you have to move it on. You have to progress it. If within the first 3 minutes you can see that actually it's a little bit too hard, is this? Don't be afraid to go take it back a step, or just completely change the practice that you're going to use.
Yeah, I was just thinking there in terms of, you might get some signs. So if you're working with the younger kids, it might be that they might show signs of boredom. So if that is happening, you're going, oh, or maybe they're starting to disengage. Like, that's probably a sign that either you need to move on to your next practice, or I need to put a progression on for the whole group. Or it might just be that if it's you, Jamie, I might go, right, I just need to give Jamie a challenge, because everybody else is fine, but maybe that one player is starting to disengage because it might be that's too easy for them. You might get it on the other side as well, where it might be that it's too difficult. So I think, like, just, you know, when we're planning, and this is why if we can plan, like, try and do it, but it's not an exact science. Like, we're like guesstimating, aren't we, really? And like, really, once you're live and like the session's going, you're just gonna have to play it, you know, by what you see, and make a good judgment on that. But when I'm working with coaches, I think I'm a bit sad, really, but I said, like, my favourite tool is a stopwatch. So if I do need to do like short bursts of time, and so like, let's say we're playing a wave game, because we do need to manage physical load sometimes as well. I think that's really important with older players. So if we want it to be quite intense and something's quite high tempo, we might need to use time. And that's the same thing for if we're doing something that's maybe unopposed, repetitive, and then maybe we're working on the technical of something. So we might want to time that as well, because we don't want that to go for too long, because then we run that risk of the boredom zone. Yeah, or the burnout zone if it's a really physical session. So definitely when you're working with adults, this is something to consider. So I think it's a mixture of rough planning, based on what you see at the time, and then looking for those little triggers around, are they bored, are they managing, are they striving, and then, right, and that's where you need to have, I'd say by rule, for every activity that you're doing, have 1 or 2 progressions. And then once you've reached those 2 progressions, then that might be a time to go, right, we're ready to move on to the next activity.